going to introduce them. Mr. Ayoub here. He was not only a former teacher here at Gish, he's also a parent. He had a son that went through school from Where did he go to elementary? Sally? Gates. Gates. How many of you are Gates Gators? Okay, his son went to Gates.
Gator in the house.
There's a gator in the house. There was a bulldog in the house, Farm Middle School, Farm Bulldogs. And he went through Grinnell Senior High. So let's give a warm welcome for Mr. Ayoub. So that's when we clap, freshmen, okay?
That's how you spell my name. I know you have to fill it out on this.
Tomorrow we'll do that, absolutely.
Very good. Well, it's great to be with you. This is third hour, right?
Yep, third hour.
I think this is the best hour.
It is, how'd you know? Did Little Bird tell you?
Maybe just kind of slide into that sort of thing. Anyway, so yes, I'm a writer. That's my job right now, my occupation. It's been my career. I've also been a teacher. Those are the two big things that I've done, but most of my life I've been a writer. And when I say I'm a writer, it's not like writing papers and then hand them in. I get paid for what I write. And sometimes I get paid really well for it. Sometimes not so much, but it's a good job to have. There's some things that you need to have to be a writer. What do you think the first thing is? You gotta be able to write, yeah. You can't write. But everybody can write if you can think. Can you think? Yeah. No? No, I guess we're done.
Shoot.
Yeah. If you can think, you can write. If this was a different class, if we were talking about writing, I have an exercise that I do. Sometimes you should have me come and we can do that. Or we can take an idea and we can all write a paper on that idea just because of your thinking. Okay, so writers have a number of things they have to do. They have to be able to write. Obviously, they're readers. Writers are readers. They read whatever. They read Twitter. They read magazines. They read newspapers, blogs, books, novels. They do that. They have to be able to think. But one of the big things they have to do is be curious about the world. I like questions, and so that's been really good for my job as a writer. I've also been a journalist, and as a journalist, I wrote for a newspaper. So I did the skill of writing in a particular way. So my journalism writing I wrote newspaper columns and newspaper stories. My other writing is mostly books. So those are kind of the areas that I write in. And so, but when people ask me what I do, I usually say I'm a writer. That's kind of, and people think, a number of times they think, oh man, you're a writer. And then they go, oh man, you're a writer. And then they say, isn't that hard? Well, I don't know. I don't have to lift a lot of heavy things. But it's exhausting sometimes because you have deadlines, things that people want to do. In terms of an education, like I told the last class, you don't even have to have a high school diploma to be a writer. I would suggest that you get one though, for a number of reasons. The first reason is that if you want to write in school, you have people there that can help you do that, and they can look at your writing and go, that's good, that's bad, whatever. But there's no requirement to write a book. You don't have to write a book. You don't have to have a high school diploma to write a book. You could write a book right now if you wanted to. But the skills necessary to do that and to make it good are found in school. So I suggest, I'll tell you what I did. I graduated high school, then I went to the University of Nebraska. I got a degree in journalism and English, and then I got a master's degree in mass media and education. And so that really helped me because I was around people that could tell me, you write well, you don't write so well, and so on. So that's kind of, if you go to for example, to a newspaper, they'll require a college education to write for a newspaper. It used to be that way, but they do now. So that's kind of the education thing. Those two parts. I mean, one is some places require it too. It's a great place to learn how to learn the skills and learn how to be a writer. I'm gonna skip a couple. Okay, skills, I already told you about that. Okay, so I didn't know, I always liked the language, I always liked writing and words and things like that. I came from a house where my parents read the newspaper front to back, they read everything. And so that's kind of was my background. I wasn't necessarily a great student in high school. I wasn't necessarily a great English student in high school. But I kind of hit my stride when I got to journalism school. It's kind of because it's something I wanted to do. I studied broadcast journalism. I wanted to be on the television, but writing was part of that course of study. And then when I got to graduate school, I really hit my stride. So I was living in Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, and I went out there with a friend had gone out before me, and he was in the movie business, and he wanted me to come out and get in the movie business with him. He was a screenwriter. Screenwriters write the movies on paper, and then the actors read those words, and the directors follow those directions. That's what a screenwriter does. And so I went to Los Angeles, and I ended up not getting into that business, and I was teaching school, and my wife and I decided we were going to move back to Nebraska. And so I wrote some what I call spec columns and sent them to newspapers in Nebraska, the Independent, the World Herald, a couple others. But I didn't really hear anything. So we moved back here, and then I don't know, maybe a year after that, I was actually teaching at senior high when this happened. The newspaper called and said, "Yeah, we reread your stuff and we like it." And so I started writing once a week. Every Saturday morning, I would have a column in the newspaper. Now, a column is different than a regular news story, because what time is this class over?
Let's look on that little schedule right there, Mr.
Oh.
Ayoub.
Right here,
Yeah, 3rd.
9:55?
Yep.
It's different because I get to express my opinion. Now, it doesn't mean I can express it without having some facts to back it up. Yes?
So you just really kind of like the stories, but do you write books too?
Yeah, I do write books. Yep. I've written 2, and I'm on my 3rd right now. In a minute, I'm going to explain the difference in those 2. So, is that okay, or do you want me to do it now? Thanks. I appreciate the question, though. So, a column that I get to express my opinion. And so when you get to express your opinion, it's kind of nice, but there's a thing that you have to remember is people disagree with you. And sometimes they disagree with you and they're really mad about it. So sometimes people will call me up and say, "Man, you were really good this morning. It was a great column. I cut it out. I'm going to send it to my mom." Sometimes they call me up and say, "You suck. And I hate you." Whoa. Ooh, so that didn't happen a lot, but it happened. And so you have to be able, when in that particular job of column writing, I had to be able to take some criticism. Last class, I used the term thick-skinned. You kind of had to let people who criticize you just, okay. I mean, it's part of the job to be criticized. It's part of the job to be criticized. Now, when you write a paper for your teachers, I'm sure they don't say "you suck" in the margin.
No.
Yeah. If they do, they probably shouldn't be doing it. But you criticize, right?
We use rubrics, and we have conversations with you guys one-on-one, and I bet, Mr. Ayoub, you probably have conversations with like your people who write for you, like as an editor.
Yeah.
Like what to do,
Right.
what looks
Constructive
good.
criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people call you up on the phone, they're not interested, they just want to do this, yell at me, or whatever. So the point is that when you write, it's for other people to read, and so you have to be prepared. It's a creative endeavor. It's like how many people in here like to paint or draw? Yeah. Somebody looks at it and you hope they like it, but they might not like it at all. So whenever you're in a creative endeavor, and writing is a creative endeavor, you have to be prepared for criticism. And I would never say don't go into that, because most people who do that, you people who raised your hands, you kind of have to do it, right? You just kind of need to paint or draw or whatever it is that you do. And that's kind of what the way it is for me. I really like telling stories, you know, with words. And so I can't imagine. I mean, I retired from the newspaper in 2015, but I'm busier now writing than I've ever been in my life because I'm still telling stories and stuff. So, which brings me to your point, man. So I've written 2 books, and I'm in the middle of the third. The first book I wrote was a book about a young boy whose mother had died of cancer, and he was trying to hold his family together. He had a brother who was a drug addict and a brother who was away at college and kind of not very supportive. And so it's just the story of him trying to hold things together, and he's all stressed out. He's 11. And these mysterious gifts show up at his house, and it kind of changes his life. So I wrote that story, and you know, I'm not quite sure where the story came from. You know, it just kind of came out of my mind. Obviously, I had it in there rolling around for a while. It didn't take me that long to write it. It's about 150 pages. It's not real long. And so about a year later, I got an email from a film producer, a movie producer in Hollywood, and he had read the book, and he liked it, and he wanted to do what's called an option. An option. And an option is he wanted to buy my story for a year. He paid me for it. Not very much, not as much as I wanted, but he paid me a little money, and for a year, he had the rights, the sole rights, to try to sell that story to a film company, a production company, a studio, or somebody who said, yeah, we're gonna make that a movie. Now, had that happened, it didn't happen. We did it for 3 years, and then we kind of parted ways. But had that happened, what would then they would have had to buy my story. I might have used it. Did I say buy? He wanted to just sell the story. Then they would have had to buy the story from me. And that would have cost them a lot of money. Okay? So when you paint something, you know, that's yours and that's your creative thing. So make sure that if somebody wants to buy it, that they pay you what it's worth, because I'm sure it's worth a lot. So, so then I wrote another story about a stranger who crashes in a car in a small town, and nobody knows who he is. He has amnesia. You can't tell him who he is. And so it's about rumor in a small town and what happens, you know, like rumors in a high school. You know how those go. Yeah, like wildfires, right? So that's what that is.
That's it, what you call a simile, when you use like or as, like wildfire, like it spreads really quickly.
Rumors. Yeah. Or if you did it as a metaphor, it'd be the wildfire, the rumor
Is a wildfire.
spreading like a wildfire through, that one, I guess that would be similar. Okay, we're off track. I get all excited about those. The third book I'm writing right now, it's a biography of a newspaper publisher, the former publisher of the World Herald. And this is a book that's commissioned. Now, normally, those other 2 books, I write them, then I try to sell them. Okay. This book is commissioned, which means that they approached me and said, we'll pay you X amount of dollars if you write this story. And of course, you know, there were certain things that had to, so every Monday for the last 6 months now, I've gone to Omaha to meet with this guy. He's cooperated, and so I interview him, and then he gives me his files, and so this is a big, big project. It's going to take me 2 years to do it. I'm about halfway through it right now. So this one requires tremendous time management. All writing requires time management that's on deadline. And most writing is on deadline. When your teachers give you an assignment, they say, and it's due, that's a deadline. So you're on the clock right there. And in a minute the teacher says, it's due, then you just have to start managing your time, right? Well, what am I going to do? Well, I got a date tonight, so that's out. You know, tomorrow I'm going to sleep till 2, so that's out. And then I have Walking Dead marathon, so that's out. So you got to start managing your time. Okay. Now, if your paper's due on Monday, then you have problems. Something's got to go. It's the same thing in my job. When I was at the newspaper, I had a deadline. When I first started there, I had 5 columns a week, so I had 5 deadlines a week. They didn't. They were every day. I was thinking I had 2 on one. Actually, I had 5 deadlines on 4 days. So Friday, I actually was writing for 2 days. Saturday and Sunday. So, but Tuesdays, I didn't have a deadline when I first started. So I had to manage my time, what else I had to do, because I had other stories I had to write, I had things I had to do with the paper, you know. Part of the job that they hired me to do was to be a mentor to young writers. So I was like a writing coach, they said, I was a coach. And so I would meet with the young reporters and talk about the writing and stuff like that, so. Anyway, time management's a big thing, and you know, I'm not very good at it, still not very good at it. So, you know, the old saying, if it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would ever get done. I mean, that's my story. I'm not recommending that as something that you do. But it does give you the skill to write under some sort of pressure. So, for example, I can remember going to the College World Series in Omaha, and the game ended at 11 o'clock, and my deadline was midnight. And I had to write 700 words between 11 and midnight, and it had to make sense. Had to be good enough to be published in the paper the next day. So, you know, you pre-write it a little bit. You know some things you want to add, put in, but putting it all together. And so it's a pretty intense 60 minutes, really. And your editors are calling you on your phone going, "Hey, where's that column?"
Yeah.
And you're yelling at them, "Don't call me till I'm done." You know? So that time management skill is part of that. Sometimes when I'm hurried, it's my own fault. And I do okay work, but I'm not sure it's my best work. But when I manage my time a little better and give myself time to rewrite, which is the most important writing for me, is the rewrite, the edit, whatever you call it. What do you call that in 6 traits?
In revising.
Revising,
Yep,
yeah.
that's right before the editing piece.
Yeah. So I also have somebody who does that for me, an editor. The book I'm writing now, I have an editor, and I've just really been blessed with a great editor. He's a great guy. He lives in Omaha. We talk all the time. He sits in on most of the interviews I have with the guy I'm writing the book about. And, you know, he's great in that he's really skilled with language. He's great. He knows when I'm off track, and he's very helpful about that stuff. So in creativity, in writing in particular, you know, you should have someone that you trust their judgment. You know, what do you think of this? And that's not what an editor does. Do you guys do peer editing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, and is it always the same person, or is it?
No, we try to make it
So
different.
you know, and you don't have to mention any names, but you know, some people in here when they edit your book, it's different than when somebody else has it. You know, and for 21 years when I was at the newspaper and I filed 4,000 columns, I had the same person for 21 years, and it was great. I mean, we could finish each other's sentences. You know, that was it was like a marriage. I mean, we fought, you know, but it was a great relationship. So I was really lucky in that regard. So you got to find somebody. So in art, do you have somebody look at when you have an idea, do you run it past them?
I don't have art class.
Well,
I
when
do
you,
art at home.
yeah, I mean, but when you want to draw something, you say, "What do you think of this?"
Yeah.
And then you kind of go.
Usually she just calls it trash, but
So when somebody calls it trash, what do you do?
I just try to make it better.
So you trust that person's judgment?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what he's talking about with that thick skin of taking what they have
Yeah.
to give you
And
feedback.
they're not calling you trash, right? That's the
Yeah.
hard part. When somebody says that is terrible, they're not saying you're terrible, they're saying that's terrible. Now, some people did say I was terrible, and then I just said, well, we're getting off the phone here about. I'm not, life's too short to have people that yell at you, right?
Right.
Please. But if you want to talk about my art or my writing, or then that's something else. Okay, so those are my books. Did I answer your question there, Emma?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So I had in 4,000 columns, it's kind of hard to pick out a column or two that's important. But I did get to do a lot of things. I met the President of the United States. Which was kind of fun, and I was doing that in association with something that I was writing, and I did write about meeting the President of the United States. But what I really liked was when people read my column and it did something to them. It changed their lives. It gave them a perspective, and that was important. That was important to me. I'll tell the same story I told the last class about someone called me at work and told me that a guy named Joe who had multiple sclerosis, which is a degenerative disease where you lose your muscles just weaken and atrophy, and they just kind of, you can't do anything. You're wheelchair bound, and eventually it'll kill you. Well, a guy named Joe, pretty advanced stages of multiple sclerosis, he got around with an electric scooter, one of those.
Have ever seen those before, those electric scooters?
Like at Walmart?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the ones at the grocery store. This was small, a little smaller, and that's how he got around. He still had enough movement in his hands. Well, anyway, somebody stole his.
Oh.
And so essentially, this man he had a caretaker that helped him in his home, but this man's life was, essentially over in a sense. Without the scooter, he didn't have any money. And so I wrote a column about it, and the point of my column was that, theft is one thing, but sometimes it hits in a place where it just, when I just told you that story, your reaction, it hits in a place that's really different, And so the day it ran, I got a call from some people who had coffee that morning, and they were talking about it, and they had raised money among their coffee group that morning to buy this guy a new scooter. Come to find out, 2 other groups of people had done the same thing. So Joe got a new scooter. About a week later, his old one showed up. It was kind of beat up, but and they got the guy that did it. And it turned out, I didn't tell myself, it turned out it wasn't a malicious thing as much as it's kind of just a stunt or a prank, or I'm going to take that and drive it and see what it's like. Not knowing the circumstances under which someone would use that, this was his only way to get around. So those are the kind of columns that I really like them, because, eventually, as I understand it, that, what I write in the end is always about people. That's kind of the story. It's always about people. So understanding people is a skill that writers need to have. And so one of the things that I like to do is I like to try to write dialogue. I practice writing dialogue. So if I go to Starbucks, I'm an eavesdropper. I listen to how people speak, to the rhythm of their language, to the language they use, and to their emotion behind the words, all kinds of things. And because when I write a book, a story, I want the person in there to sound like a real person, not somebody that's just not a real person. So that's been important to me. I like to watch how people act. I like to watch how they move. All those things that you do, so your characters are real in your stories.
And you said before you're curious. Could you
I'm
kind
a very
of talk?
curious person. Yeah. So I've always been curious about the world, about life, and so I ask a lot of questions because I want to know, and it's annoying to some people.
That's
When
a
my
good
son
trait.
was a teenager, it was very annoying. To him anyway. But, I like to know. And so the internet's a wonderful place for me, because I can do research, and I like to find out how things work and those kinds of things. And that's really important if you're going to tell a story, because, one of the things that, for example, this biography I'm writing, the man who I'm writing it about has he's done certain things. And one of the things he's done is he worked on this huge printing operation, this press. And for me to understand how it works, I have to do research, I have to talk to him. But now I'm kind of curious about the whole thing. The World Herald used to be a company that was owned by its employees, which is really an unusual thing. The corporation owned by its employees. And that's a particular kind of thing. And so, part of what I've had to do is learn how that works. So curiosity is important, and school is a great place. One thing I always told my son when he was really little, in kindergarten, I said, ask the teacher a lot of questions. Ask them till they get annoyed, because that's what they're there for. Is asking questions. And so, I was always the kid in the corner going, teacher. Okay, we have 9 minutes. Do you have questions? Yes, sir.
What made you want to be a writer?
well, I can do it. I mean, so, it's kind of like, I can do this. That's really a thing. Because, I mean, what do you want to be? I mean, come on. We all want to be movie stars, rich and famous, right? But eventually what I really found out is that I can do this, so that I'm good at this. So maybe I should explore how to do this in a way so that's part of it. That's part of it. But I have to admit that I kind of like, when people ask me what I do, I kind of like to say I'm a writer because there's the two, oh man, you're a writer. Oh man, you're a writer. So they think I'm a nerd or a geek or whatever. And I am. Very much so. So, do you have an idea what you want to do or be?
Choreographer or veterinarian.
Wow. That's quite a range.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. For the same reasons?
Mostly because, I have a passion for choreography,
Uh-huh.
and then, I do, really well with animals
Mhm.
and, that kind of stuff, and I know how their body works and
Right.
and how I have to do this.
And part of it, and I'll just be frank with you, part of this is that, you have to make a living too, And so that was the thing that for a long time held me back about writing is I didn't know, I didn't see myself as a best-selling author, and I'm not a best-selling author, but I didn't see, well, what can I do? Well, I can write for the newspaper. Newspapers don't pay that great, but it's a living, it's a living, so that's great, good for you. Yes.
How did you start? The book that you were talking about, his mom died.
Oh, how did I start the book?
Yeah, how did you get
Gosh, that one, well, the boy was 11, and my son, when I wrote the book, was just a little older. So I had a young person in my house, so that was important. I was thinking about that recently, and I think part of it, what's your name?
David.
David, I think part of it, David, is that cancer had affected lots of people that I knew. And so I think that was part of it, Now the characters that I developed are just, they're not really people that I could say that's exactly who that person is, They're more of, well, the father, I can say, this young boy's father is kind of a mix of about 4 people that I know. I put their characteristics in, and so I know who that person is. I tell you how I started. I tell you how I started the story, though, is that the story's told by the young boy when he's an adult, and he's remembering this one particular Christmas when this happened, and it starts out him saying, "Oh, Christmas, another rotten Christmas," because his mom had died and he didn't see life very. So I just started with that, and then it just kind of went. And then I rewrote it. It's just stuck with it. That's a really good question. It's kind of like, when you paint or draw, do you see the full thing completely finished before you start?
Sometimes I just go through Facebook, and just look at pictures.
And then try to,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. See, you gotta, for me, I don't have to see the whole thing completely done, but I have to have some way to get there. I have to have, like what you did, look up something. Otherwise, I'm gonna go over here and then I'm gonna go, oh my God, what's going on over here? Then I have to start over. So kind of have a bit of a plan.
Hey, Mr. Ayoub, we want to talk about that book you have right there where you write your
Oh, yeah.
ideas down.
This is something I do, and I do this on my phone too, or on my computer, but mostly on my phone. I have these are called day books. And so sometimes, I've
That's
always
a great
had one.
idea.
I just write these ideas down, and I write everything down from bring home quart of milk, loaf of bread, to some important point I want to make in the story. And I just draw a line between them. And so then I go back and do that. And then I do the same thing on my phone. I'll just do it in notes or something. Or what, even more important, what I do is sometimes I'll write things down and then I'll take a picture of this. And then I have it in my phone. and I can transfer it to my computer, and that's a really good thing. But these are things that, you might hear the story, I don't know, maybe you haven't, about, oh, I had a great idea in the middle of the night and I should have gotten up and written it down.
Yeah.
I never get up and write it down because I like to sleep. But I do sometimes have great ideas in the middle of the night, but most of the time I remember them in the morning. But when I do have things. Now, the second book I wrote about the car that crashed, I drew out this isn't it, but I should have brought that one. I drew the whole town. I drew a map of the whole town and all the places that I was writing about. So when you read it, it made sense of what was north and what was south and where the crash took place and where the people saw it and all that. Because I have to get that straight in my mind too. So I drew the whole thing out. And then I just left that open when I was writing, and I could look, and there's the town. And it was in black and white, but I put in my mind there were colors. So that's why I did that. So I do this a lot, and I don't know.
Like we have graphic organizers, freshmen, where you'll have those. You know what? Now I'm starting to think about next year teaching that would be another option for students to write their notes down. What do you guys think? Do you think that should work?
Some people do this, and I know it almost turns into like a journal or a diary form.
Yeah.
But
It's a great idea.
the only thing I would caution is I wouldn't write like 20 pages and then go back to page 1 and go, what did this mean?
Yeah.
I try to review it daily just to see what I've written down.
Great
Yeah,
idea.
it works for me, and I got the idea from another writer.
It's a great idea. I love
It's kind
that.
of old school. I mean, paper.
I like it.
The phone thing works.
Did you take journalism in class when you were in high school?
I did.
You
Just
guys know what
myself.
journalism?
I tell you a story. I took journalism. My senior high was 10 through 12. I
Okay.
took it my sophomore year. I loved it. I had my place already picked on the Islander I was going to be, and I missed the deadline. And Mrs. Barth, God love her, she didn't put me on the staff, and I hated her. And then years later, I loved her because she taught me responsibility. Broke my heart. Oh, all my friends were on the Islander, but yeah, that's how I learned. about
You guys
it.
know what the Islander here is? It's our newspaper. And so when you're thinking about as sophomores, adding some electives, I think journalism is an elective.
Yeah.
Think about getting on the journalism where you get to write.
You
Keep
do it,
your
and
options
you can
open.
take pictures too, and
Yeah,
I
photographer.
think they do some online stuff.
Yeah.
It's storytelling is what it is.
Well, and I just covered that class last period, and what they're doing right now is making commercials.
Yeah, very good creative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Good creative. Any other questions? You guys have been great.
This is a great
Good
group.
questions. Thank you.
Anybody else have something?
So what they said about third hour was actually,
It's actually true, George. It's actually true.
No, let me see it. No.
Hey, so freshmen, you know what? We have the Independent is also online. So if you ever want to read Mr. Ayoub's columns, pull up the Independent. Make sure it's not England, that it's actually Grand Island, Nebraska.
yeah, you have to search under my name to find it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. Oh, yeah.
So 2 more classes?
Yeah.
Okay, so what,
Now you have Miss Veach's class.
okay, and this is,
And it's in here.
yeah, but they don't even have.
Okay,